The Shining, one of Stephen King's most popular books of all times, not only a bestseller, but also a very popular movie. But I never read it up until this point. In 2026, I finally decided to read it after lurking for months and months and months on the Stephen King subreddit, and everybody rating this book super, super high, either as an A or an S, 5-star, 4.5-star rating. Everyone's saying, you gotta read The Shining. It is one of the scariest books of all times. It is a slow burn done right. And today, I'm gonna give you my opinions on whether this book is in fact a masterpiece or is it overhyped. Before I started reading this book, I was quite nervous because everyone on the subreddit, loves this book. And I wanted to fit in. I wanted to conform to this opinion that this is one of Stephen King's best books, if not best of all time. And I put it off for so long. This is my 22nd book of Stephen King that I've read, or my 21st. And, I could have read it much earlier on, but I just was afraid. So I finally bit the bullet and decided to read this book. It took me about 2 weeks to complete it just because of work and stuff. And I thought it was a good book. I thought it was a great book, in fact. But I have a hard time rating this book. Normally, after I read a book for a while, I feel like I can simply or easily kind of categorize it, a 3-star, a 4-star book, and maybe it has that elusive 5-star rating, or somewhere in between. But I'm conflicted with The Shining. There were things I really, really enjoyed about The Shining, and then there were just some tropes and some parts that I just didn't like, that just kind of confused me or just took me out and questioned to why Stephen King had to make certain decisions regarding the plot. And we're going to get into all of that. So, essentially, I don't want to go into a whole synopsis of this. Essentially, if you've read this book, you know what it's about. You already know how fucked up the Overlook Hotel is, and you know how the Torrance family is cursed, right? So let's first talk about the pros. This was a slow burn done right. In some ways, this was a character study, but a family study of the Torrances, all right? But it mainly focused, in my opinion, on Jack, and I resonated the most with that, and I really enjoyed his, descent into madness, and also how Stephen King in some way probably portrayed himself as Jack Torrance, dealing with alcoholism and the withdrawal symptoms that were associated with Jack trying to get sober. And that put him over the edge by the end of the book. And I thought that was really cool because you got to see him have this mental conflict with himself, trying to do well by his family, by his wife, by his kids. But he has a mean streak. He's had anger. He's broken his son's arm. He's inflicted pain on other kids as well. And he is haunted by that. He regrets it. And I really like that inner dialogue that he had, saying he's not going to hurt his son anymore. He's not going to get mad at Wendy anymore. But at the same time, you can see that Wendy, his wife, is still very suspicious of Jack. And at that point, Jack's saying, well, I'm doomed if I do, doomed if I don't. It's a catch-22. If I drink, she's mad at me. If I don't drink, she's still suspicious and gets mad at me, and she'll never believe me. And that frustration there, I thought was super well encapsulated, and I thought made Jack Torrance a really interesting character. I think one of my favorite protagonists so far in Stephen King's bibliography, and I'm sure many people, at least some anyway, will agree that Jack, for a main character of Stephen King, is well fleshed out. I like him a lot. I thought Alan Pangborn was good in Needful Things, but this one here, great stuff. And obviously, we need to talk about room 207, probably, if not the most scariest part of the book, when they find that bloated body of that lady. That was good. Now, again, I don't get scared in books, but I feel like if I was younger and I somehow procured this book, yeah, I would be pretty terrified. So that was fantastic. I'll even say that in some ways a more scarier part of the book was when the elevator started going on by itself and they were just like, what the fuck's going on? That was really, really cool. And I thought that whole fact that like Jack just didn't want to believe that anything was going on in that hotel, yet Wendy was just stone cold being like, yeah, something's messed up, and she's just like mad that Jack can't accept that. And I thought that was a really, really powerful scene, in my opinion. It's kind of like the calm before the storm, before Jack essentially gets drunk by this mysterious liquor, invisible alcohol that was given to him by the hotel's ghost. So with all those positives, there are a few parts that I just couldn't get into. I just couldn't enjoy. Halloran as a character at the beginning of the book was very interesting because he describes the Shine, he kind of describes the very loose mechanisms of how it works in Stephen King's universe that incorporates, I forget the girl from Firestarter, her, and as well as Carrie, or anybody in the, any kid that has like telekinetic, telepathic powers, that sort of shit. So that was good. But the whole concept of Danny shouting to Halloran across the country, which in itself is okay, but then the fact that Halloran manages to make it just in time, after all these delays, after all the hardship he went through, just to essentially be a character that saves Wendy and Danny from sure annihilation by getting whacked by the roque mallet. I'm not a fan of that trope whatsoever. I'm not a fan of the idea of save just in the nick of time. I'm a realist. That's most likely not going to happen. And that's why I cannot give this book a 5-star rating. It was frustrating to see it happen because you just kind of knew that was going to happen, although Stephen King did fake us out because Halloran himself really believed that he was going to die. Didn't happen. At least that was a good twist. But still, it didn't sit well with me. Now, the other part that I did not enjoy about this book was the whole hedge animal shit, like the lions and stuff. It was really hard to understand the idea of it because is it in fact attacking them? Are they actually moving off their hedge pedestal, or is it just a figment of their imagination? But Stephen King describes Danny and Halloran with cuts and scrapes from the hedges. So that there was kind of hard to picture in my head and felt a little bit cheesy, I'm not gonna lie. The whole ghost thing, haunted stuff, great. The hedge animals, I don't think it really added much to the story. If anything, it confused me as a reader more. And the final thing that frustrated me or made it difficult to follow was the eventual turning of Jack as a bad guy. He's sitting down in the boiler room until the morning, and that's just it happens. And I reread this scene, went back several times to just reread when is it cut and dry that he has become possessed in some way by the hotel. And I wish that it was a little bit clearer. Now, I'm not sure how many people feel the same way. I'm probably in the minority about it, but it just felt unclear and not, precise. And I was just like, why is he like turning all of a sudden? Like, what's going on? So that might just be my reading comprehension, but I feel as though like my argument is maybe has some sort of merit. But the book regardless was really good. I enjoyed it. I read it, like I said, rather quickly for a Stephen King novel, and for someone who I've been reading almost exclusively in the past several months, I thought it's one of his better novels for sure, but it's still not my favorite novel of Stephen King thus far. It probably is in the top 5, but it's not. I don't think it's in my top 3, and this is where we kind of get to the sort of imposter syndrome that I occasionally feel with reading books, because I kind of committed down this path to read all of Stephen King's books last year, and reading about a quarter of his books now. I think I have a good sense of what his writing style is, sort of like the characters and the prose and the plots that he the plots that he writes, and being well acquainted with the Stephen King subreddit, I feel like I might be more in the minority about this book being an S tier book. I don't think it's an S tier book. I think it's good for sure. I think it's a good book, but I have a hard time deciding where to put this book. And I don't want to be influenced by, oh, this is a great book or whatever, but yeah, I'm going to give this book a 4-star rating. I thought it was a great book, but it's not a 9 on 10. It's not an amazing book. It's not a perfect book. Now, people can make the argument that perfect books don't exist, whatever, but in my eyes, there could be the idea that, some books are perfect for that moment. So what do I rate this book? After listing my pros and cons and kind of my rationale behind my likes and dislikes, I have a better sense of where this book fits in Stephen King's catalog, and also in my own space, all the books that I've read. Benchmark, I have to compare this to Salem's Lot. These books were published around the same time. It was early on in his career, and those are 2 of the books that the Stephen King subreddit are, they go bananas for. But Salem's Lot is better than The Shining, and I gave Salem's Lot an 8.5 out of 10. So we're gonna give this an 8 on 10, a 4-star book, a 4-star rating. I thought that this book was great. There were some tropes and some ideas I just didn't like, and some parts of the plot were a little bit confusing. But overall, a great read, and there are some scenes that are genuinely scary if you're that type of person that is very vivid in their reading. And is this book overhyped? No, it's not overhyped. It's a great book. But at the same time, I don't think it's Stephen King's best book. I think that this book is a great piece of literature for this genre. But at the same time, I'm not going to recommend it as the first book for people who have never read Stephen King before. I don't think that this book is the one to go for. So let me know what you think about my thoughts on The Shining. I think that it's a great book, but I don't think it's an amazing book. So if you made it this far, appreciate the ability to listen to it and watch a video for that long, especially this sort of, review style video that doesn't typically garner a lot of traction. But yeah, I just wanted to be a bit more real with my videos, a bit more slow pace. I'm not trying to, you know, add theatrics to an excitement where it's not necessary. But yeah, thank you very much.